Greetings, friends, and welcome to the captivating tale of a surgeon's journey through redemption, deceit, and the unexpected twists life has to offer. Enjoy the story. Dr. Michael Stevenson, a handsome 40-year-old surgeon, reclined on his worn but comfortable sofa, nursing a glass of cheap red wine. After a long shift at the county hospital, he relished the quiet solitude of his small apartment. Though his living quarters were modest, he took pride in the simple life he had built for himself in this sleepy little town. It was a far cry from the high-stakes, high-pressure world of the big city hospital where he had previously worked. There, he had fallen victim to the dangerous allure of power and privilege, becoming entangled in a scandalous affair with the chief of surgery's daughter. The resulting fallout had cost him his job and nearly his medical license. But here in this peaceful community, Michael had found redemption. The patients were grateful, often paying him in homemade meals and small gifts instead of the cold, hard cash he had grown accustomed to. He didn't mind. The kindness and appreciation meant far more to him than money ever could. As he sipped his wine, Michael allowed himself a rare moment of contentment. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. The shrill ring of the phone jolted Michael out of his reverie. Sighing, he set down his glass and hurried to answer, already dreading the prospect of another late-night emergency. "Dr. Stevenson," he answered, his voice tinged with weary resignation. "Doctor, we have a critical situation at the hospital," the frantic voice on the other end replied. "There's been a terrible car accident. The victim is billionaire Richard Andrews. He's in bad shape and we need you here immediately." Michael's eyes widened in alarm. Richard Andrews was one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the region. If he was in such dire straits, it must be serious indeed. "I'm on my way," Michael said, already grabbing his coat and car keys. As he raced through the deserted streets, Michael's mind raced. Richard Andrews was known for his philanthropic work and generous spirit, but he was also notoriously demanding and impatient. Michael knew that if he failed to save the tycoon's life, his own career could be ruined. Steeling himself, Michael burst through the hospital doors, ready to face the challenge head-on. The operating room was a flurry of activity as Michael and his team worked tirelessly to stabilize Richard Andrews. The billionaire had sustained massive internal injuries, and the odds of survival were slim. Michael's colleague, Dr. Elaine Sinclair, eyed him skeptically. "Are you sure you can handle this, Michael? This is a high-stakes case, and we can't afford any mistakes." Michael met her gaze with unwavering determination. "I've got this, Elaine. Just give me your full support and we'll pull him through." For the next 4 grueling hours, the surgical team fought a desperate battle against time and the ravages of Richard's injuries. Michael's hands moved with precision and focus, his years of experience guiding every incision and suture. Finally, as the clock struck 3 a.m., Michael stepped back, exhaustion etched on his features, but triumph in his eyes. "He's stable. We did it." The room erupted in relieved cheers, and Michael allowed himself a rare smile. He had defied the odds and saved the life of one of the most powerful men in the region. This could be the turning point he needed to rebuild his tarnished reputation. True to his reputation, Richard Andrews spared no expense in ensuring his recovery. Within days, the drab hospital room had been transformed into a veritable palace, complete with the finest linens, gourmet meals, and a team of specially flown-in medical staff. Michael marveled at the billionaire's lavish accommodations, a far cry from the modest surroundings he was accustomed to. Yet, despite the opulence, Richard seemed to take a genuine interest in the surgeon who had saved his life. "Dr. Stevenson, I can't thank you enough for what you've done," Richard said, his voice tinged with genuine gratitude. "If it weren't for your skill and quick thinking, I wouldn't be here today." Michael felt a twinge of discomfort at the effusive praise, unused to such overt displays of appreciation. "I was simply doing my job, Mr. Andrews. Any surgeon worth their salt would have done the same." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. You took a huge risk operating on me, and you succeeded where others would have failed. That kind of talent and dedication deserves recognition." The billionaire's eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief. "In fact, I'd like you to be the one to oversee my recovery. I trust you implicitly, and I think we could learn a lot from each other." Michael hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Working so closely with a man of such immense wealth and influence was uncharted territory for him. But the sincere gratitude in Richard's voice was difficult to ignore. I'm honored, Mr. Andrews. I'll do everything in my power to ensure your full recovery." Richard smiled, already reaching for his phone. "Excellent. Now let's discuss how we can make your stay here a bit more comfortable, shall we?" 6 months had passed since the fateful night when Michael had saved Richard Andrews' life. In that time, the two men had forged an unexpected friendship, with the billionaire often seeking Michael's counsel on matters both personal and professional. So it came as no surprise when Richard burst into Michael's office one afternoon, a wide grin plastered across his face. "Michael, my friend, I have the most wonderful news," he exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. Michael looked up from his paperwork, a bemused smile tugging at his lips. "Don't tell me you finally found the time to take that long-overdue vacation?" Richard laughed, shaking his head. "Even better. I'm getting married." Michael's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Married? That's wonderful, Richard. Who's the lucky lady?" "Her name is Katie, and she's the most amazing woman I've ever met," Richard gushed, his eyes shining with adoration. "We met at a charity event a few months ago, and it was love at first sight. She's even pregnant with our first child." Michael felt a pang of unease at the billionaire's enthusiasm. Something about this seemed too good to be true, but he didn't want to dampen Richard's obvious joy. "That's fantastic news, Richard. I'm truly happy for you both." Michael paused, then added, "I assume you'd like me to be there to witness the occasion?" "Absolutely," Richard exclaimed. "In fact, I was hoping you'd be kind enough to give me your honest opinion on Katie. I value your judgment, and I want to make sure she's the right woman for me." Michael nodded, his mind already whirring with questions and concerns. "Of course, Richard, I'd be honored to attend your wedding." As Richard bustled out of the office, Michael leaned back in his chair, a nagging sense of foreboding settling in the pit of his stomach. Something about this whole situation didn't feel right, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to get caught up in a web of deceit. The grand ballroom of the Andrews estate was a dazzling display of opulence, with crystal chandeliers, gilded accents, and a sea of elegantly dressed guests. Michael stood off to the side, sipping a glass of champagne, and observing the proceedings with a growing sense of unease. As Richard and his radiant bride, Katie, exchanged vows, Michael couldn't help but scrutinize the young woman's features. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't quite place it. Then, as the couple turned to face the applauding crowd, Michael's blood ran cold. He recognized that face. It was Sonia, a notorious con artist he had operated on years ago in the city prison. She had been sentenced for a series of high-profile scams, including swindling several wealthy individuals out of millions. Michael's heart raced as he watched the woman he knew as Katie cling to Richard's arm, her radiant smile masking a sinister intent. She was up to her old tricks, and this time, the target was the unsuspecting billionaire. Unable to contain his shock, Michael surged forward, pushing his way through the crowd until he stood before the bewildered couple. "Richard, stop this wedding immediately!" he shouted, drawing startled gasps from the guests. "That woman is not who she seems. Her name is Sonia, and she's a dangerous con artist." Richard's face crumpled in confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about, Michael? This is my fiancée, Katie. I don't understand." Katie's eyes narrowed, and for a fleeting moment, Michael saw a flash of panic cross her features. But she quickly recovered, placing a delicate hand on Richard's arm. "Darling, I think your friend has had one too many champagnes. I'm your Katie, the woman you love. Don't listen to him." But Michael refused to be swayed. "Richard, look at her closely. This woman is faking a pregnancy to trick you into marriage. She's a con artist, and she's after your money." Richard turned to Katie, his eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. "Is this true?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Quickly, Michael reached out and took Katie's hand, pulling back the collar of her dress. The woman shrieked, Richard looking on indignantly. "What do you think you're doing?" Richard demanded. But Michael ignored him, his eyes fixed on the scar that was now visible under the collar. It was obvious that someone had already worked on it. but it was still very conspicuous and ugly. Richard, I'm afraid to disappoint you, but your fiancée's name is not Katya. Her name is Sonia, Michael said, his voice laced with triumph. The woman, now revealed as Sonia, looked at him with eyes full of terror and stepped back, only to find herself surrounded by guards. And the best part is, you know what? She can't have children. Absolutely not. Never. After a stabbing in prison where she was serving time for the same rich husband you were going to be, Michael added, his words cutting through the stunned silence. Sonia's facade crumbled, and she lunged for the nearest exit, her designer gown billowing behind her as she fled the scene. The stunned guests parted like the Red Sea, allowing the con artist to make her escape, leaving a trail of shattered dreams and broken trust in her wake. In the aftermath of the aborted wedding, Richard Andrews sat in his study, his head in his hands. Michael watched him with a mixture of sympathy and concern, unsure of how the billionaire would react. Finally, Richard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "Thank you, Michael. You've saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Michael nodded, relieved to see that Richard had come to his senses. "I'm just glad I was able to recognize her in time. That woman is a master of deception." Richard let out a weary sigh. "I can't believe I was so blind. I really thought she was the one, you know. I was ready to give her everything." He paused, then added with a rueful chuckle, "I suppose I should have known better than to trust the heart of a con artist." Michael reached across the desk and placed a reassuring hand on Richard's arm. "You were only looking for love, Richard. There's nothing wrong with that. And now, thanks to you, that young nurse back at my old hospital might just get a second chance at happiness." Richard's brow furrowed in confusion. "Nurse? What nurse?" Michael smiled. "Never mind. The point is, you've learned a valuable lesson, and you're still standing. That's what matters." Richard nodded, a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. "You're right, and I have you to thank for it. If you hadn't been there to expose Sonia's true nature, who knows what might have happened?" He leaned back in his chair, a newfound determination etched on his features. "I may have lost my chance at love this time, but I won't give up. Someday, I'll find the right woman, the one who truly cares for me, not my money. And when I do, I'll be sure to get your expert opinion first." Michael chuckled, relieved to see the spark of resilience in his friend. "I'll be there, Richard. Count on it." As he left the Andrews estate, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and satisfaction. He had not only saved a life, but had also helped a man find the courage to open his heart again. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest rewards come from taking a risk, even if it means putting your own reputation on the line.